There is this video game trailer making its rounds on the internet and people are freaking the hell out about it. It's about an upcoming video game called Unrecord and everybody's saying pretty much the same things. How does it look so real? This is next level video game graphics. It even goes so far as people saying that the official gameplay trailer doesn't contain any gameplay whatsoever and that everything is 100% manually animated and scripted cutscene. But honestly, there's no reason for me to believe that that would be the case. As far as I can tell, the trailer is 100% real gameplay. But we'll get into more detail about it later. For now, let's talk graphics. The main reason why we barely ever see this type of realism in games is because video games are not aiming to be photoreal. They're aiming to be hyper-real. If you're not familiar with those two terms, let me give you a quick way to differentiate between the two. Photorealism is about depicting things exactly how they are in the real world. No ifs, buts, or ands. Hyperrealism is mostly the same thing, but it also adds artistic intent, narrative, and emotions into the mix as well. You may be familiar with the old saying, the more you add to the truth subtracts from the truth. That is essentially hyperrealism in a nutshell. And video games, just like pretty much any form of entertainment media out there, doesn't aim to be photoreal, they aim to be hyperreal. The truth is, real life just looks kind of boring most of the time, because nobody went over the real world and designed it with artistic intent. It just kinda looks the way it does. Sure, there's gorgeous looking things in real life, but those are usually few and far between, whereas the hyperrealism, it's mostly the other way around. So video games have been able to produce this level of photorealism for the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. It's just that it's never being realized to the fullest. I can prove this by simply showing you a comparison of a picture I took on the walk the other day and me pressing play on the video, because this is actually footage from a game called Kingdom Come Deliverance from 2018. But notice how you couldn't tell that it was a game until the video started playing and then your brain connected the dots and realized, oh wait, this is not actually real life. It puts to show that in order to make a game look photoreal, you need to do a lot more than just make the graphics photoreal. Not to say that the graphics aren't important to make a photoreal looking game, because they are. Here, for example, is a clip from the same game, just a different time and place. And here you probably don't get fooled so easily. While it does look impressive and realistic, your brain probably doubts that it's actually real because it looks too artistically pleasing, with the way the volumetric lighting of the sun casts an orange glow over the entire scene. Photorealism, hyperrealism. Another aspect that's incredibly important is the way the camera moves. We see most of the world through our eyes, which are attached to our bumbling selves, and we as human beings just happen to be very clumsy with everything we're doing. We walk into things, stumble a lot, bob our heads up and down with every step we take, look around in confusion, and are generally just pretty ungraceful creatures. That's why handheld smartphone video and GoPro footage looks so believable by default and gives you a good feeling for the scene, because they do a very good job of mimicking the way we actually see the world ourselves. Video game cameras, on the other hand, tend to move very unnatural, usually way too smooth and precise, and because of that, kinda robotic in a way. And if you're wondering why we keep looking at GoPro videos of people riding on motorcycles, well, it's because the second video I showed you earlier wasn't real video at all. It's actually footage from a game called Ride 4 that released in 2020. And if you don't believe me, here's footage of the player bailing and respawning. And as soon as you saw that, your brain went, ah, it's a video game! We can even do the same experiment but in reverse, by recording a real video in a way that's usually only seen in video games. It can lead to some quite the mind-bending results. Here, for example, is a clip of somebody reloading and inspecting an AK-47 the way it's usually only seen in a video game. Or was this the Call of Duty Modern Warfare footage and this is the live action video? Listen, don't feel bad if you're having a hard time telling which one is real, but feel free to leave a guess in the comments regardless. Now that you have a general idea of photorealism, I think it's time we get back to the main topic of the video, which is Unrecord. I mean, look at it, it looks so real, you can't even tell it's a game! Well, you can, but for now let's review what we have learned earlier. First things first, the camera. The camera in this game looks really believable. It's obviously trying to represent a body cam. Body cameras tend to be on the smaller side of things, and the way it is with smaller cameras, they tend to come with some deficiencies. You may notice that no matter what clip of the game we look at, there's always part of the image that are crushed completely to black and parts that are completely clipping into the whites. And that is completely by design. The difference between the brightest part and the darkest part of an image is called the dynamic range. And the smaller the image sensor of a camera, the worse the dynamic range tends to be. And to also reflect that in-game, they have completely crushed the dynamic range of the virtual camera as well. I just happened to have filmed in a very similar location a couple of years back with my Canon EOS M50. It's an entry-level mirrorless camera with an APS-C sized image sensor. And this time it's not a trick, I swear, this is actually a video that I filmed. And as you can see, the difference in dynamic range is night and day. In Unrecord, indoors is completely crushed and the windows from inside are completely blown out. Whereas with my footage, and a halfway decent camera, both indoors and outdoors still have plenty of information left. Smaller image sensors are also less sensitive to light, which means they need to expose the image for much longer. That also leads to a lot of motion blur, and you can see that in the Unrecord footage as well. But another thing that the Unrecord camera does is it adds a lot of barrel distortion, which is very common with wide-angle lenses. It also adds some very strong vignetting in the corners, which usually only happens if you're using a very unorthodox lens setup or if you're using a fisheye adapter. I'm not exactly sure how much sense it would make on a body cam, but in my opinion at least, it doesn't hurt the immersion. Now we'll get into the camera motion. What body cams do very well is capture the bumpiness and roughness of humans walking and doing things in general. And to understand how Unrecord is doing such a good job at it, we can finally start dabbling into the gameplay. Because here's the thing, the camera in this game is not actually player controlled at all, which is very uncommon for first-person shooters. In most FPS games, looking around and aiming is coupled. Where you look is where you aim, and where you aim is where you look. Whereas in this game, the camera is completely removed from the player's control. The only thing the player controls is where the gun aims at. And this way, the game can add as much natural camera motion as it needs without affecting the player's aim. The only time the camera actually moves is when the player is trying to aim somewhere off screen, in which case the camera will shift over to make sure that the point the player aims at never actually leaves the screen. It's a little hard to see in some scenes, but especially when there's a flashlight on screen, it becomes quite apparent how the system works. Notice how the camera never really moves until the pointer, in this case the light cone, tries to move off screen. As of writing the script, some footage has been released demonstrating this a little bit better. Here it's quite obvious that the only thing the player really controls is where the gun aims at. You may also think that this aiming system looks familiar, especially if you have played shooters on the Wii before or if you've seen gameplay of the Razer Hydra, if anybody remembers that thing. In those instances, it works much the same. The player controls where to aim and the camera only moves if the pointer reaches the edge of the screen. With that being said, there seems to be a way for the player to manually override. Manually. There's a U in there. I should say the U, right? If there's a U in the word, maybe I should pronounce the U. With that being said though, it seems like there is a way for the player to manually override the camera controls. It seems like there's some sort of hold or toggle that allows the player to switch the controls from the gun to the camera, as seen in this clip for example. Notice how the gun stays in place aiming at the same spot, where it's now the camera that's looking around. The dialogue system seems to work mostly the same way actually. Whenever there's the 3 dots on screen, the player can switch the controls from the gun to the dialogue options. Notice how as soon as the dialogue system is on screen, there's no longer any motion to the gun or the camera. Obviously all of this breaks immersion, and now that you know how it works, it might not fool you anymore. Aside from those instances, there's actually more telltale signs that it is actually gameplay and not either real-world footage or completely scripted video. In some parts you can see the inverse kinematic system awkwardly shift over the player model to make sure it doesn't clip into any geometry. IRL you would just bump into the object, and if this was fully scripted, they would have probably ironed this out beforehand. So yeah, that about sums up my analysis on Unrecord. If there's one thing you can take away from this video, it's that photorealism isn't a question of technological advancements as much as it is a question of intent and style, unlike certain companies are trying to make you believe it is. And despite their attempts of pushing ray tracing as the new threshold for realistic graphics, all they have really shown is that rasterized graphics have become really good. You can get photorealism with rasterization just as much as you can get stylized graphics with ray tracing and path tracing. Heck, artists can draw photorealistic pictures on a piece of canvas. They're not doing ray calculations in their brain when they do so. They're just eyeballing it, going by their experience, or just doing whatever looks right to them. It's a rough approximation that just needs to be close enough to reality. That's practically no difference to what real-time rasterized graphics does. Approximate reality. But that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two in the process. I most certainly did, and I hope I'll see you guys around next time. Have a good one! Bye bye.